Being stuck in that position for going on 23 hours now makes it very difficult for him.
Let me tell you about Jon Jones, a young med student and family guy. Back in 2009, during a holiday in Utah with his pregnant wife and kid, Jon and his crew planned a trip to the Nutty Putty Cave, thinking it was an easy cave near their home in Salt Lake City. But what started as a fun adventure turned into a real-life nightmare, leading to one of the scariest incidents in cave history. This tale's not for the faint-hearted, especially if you're claustrophobic. The Nutty Putty Caves, found back in 1960, were tricky to navigate with their tight, slippery paths. This cave, known as a beginner's spot, attracted loads of visitors annually, ranging from 5,000 to 25,000. But things took a turn after some high-profile rescue missions from 1999 to 2004. Many got stuck in its small passages, including a 23-year-old who was trapped for over 7 hours, not far from where Jon Jones would face his own challenge. After another scary event where a teen got stuck upside down all night, things took a serious turn. By May 2006, the entrance to Nutty Putty Cave got closed off. There was a big tussle between local cave explorers, or spelunkers, and authorities. The officials thought it was too risky, calling it a ticking time bomb, while the local spelunkers argued, saying people should take charge of their own safety. It was a real debate about whether to shut the cave for good. People really cared about keeping Nutty Putty Cave open. One person wrote a letter to Utah's oldest newspaper saying, "I'm tired of the government making choices for us. The cave's been a great spot for me and my kids." They asked how many people got hurt or died there, suggesting a sign with risks to let people decide for themselves. As the war waged on, finally, in September 2007, the caves were officially closed to the public, while a new volunteer management team was put in place. This was a last-ditch attempt to prevent the cave's complete and permanent closure. And then, finally, in March 2009, the Nutty Putty Caves reopened with a brand new cave management plan. The new plan enforced a process which required would-be spelunkers to apply for a permit 21 days before their visit and agree to follow certain safeguarding procedures, such as having a minimum of 2 experienced cavers per visiting group. So, it was under these circumstances that 26-year-old Jon Jones and his then 23-year-old brother Josh Jones, plus 9 other members of his friends and family, entered the Nutty Putty Caves on the 24th of November 2009. When the group entered the cave at 8 p.m. local time, they would have been confident. While Jon and his brother hadn't visited the Nutty Putty Caves before, they had spent much of their childhood exploring Utah's caves. In fact, as a small boy, Jon had more than once acted as a trapped victim for the Utah Cave Rescue Team, a group his father had helped found. But the reality was that Jon and his brother hadn't been spelunking in years, and there is a great deal of debate as to whether Jon and his brother could act as experienced cavers on behalf of their group. Nonetheless, for the first hour, everything went well as the party explored the largest room in the cave called the Big Slide. It was at this point that his brother Josh and their 2 friends challenged each other to go further on into the next part of the cave, taking on one of the most difficult to navigate areas known as the Birth Canal. This part of the cave is so tight that only a few people can actually access it. Eventually, the birth canal passageway opens up into a small room. Several people had become stuck in the birth canal previously, but Jon, a fit, healthy, and slender man in his prime, wasn't worried. Heading through the passageway first, with his brother behind him, Jon wriggled on just his stomach, done what he thought was the entrance to the birth canal. But Jon unknowingly had taken a wrong turn down an unmapped passageway via a route known as the Corkscrew, a place where only the smallest and most flexible of cave explorers could fit. As Jon pushed forward, the passageway became tighter and tighter, and he became unable to turn back on himself. When he saw what looked like a small opening at the end of the crawl space, he continued on with hopes of being able to turn around. Unfortunately, this is where things took a turn for the worse, because Jon was crawling headfirst into a 10 by 18-inch fissure that dropped straight down. Worse still, Jon had sucked in his chest to slide past a lip of rock to get into the fissure, meaning that when his chest expanded again, he became completely trapped in an area the size of a small front-loading washing machine. Jon made several attempts to free himself, but it was no use. It was at this point that he began calling for his brother. When Josh finally found Jon for a split second, he thought that this would be a silly story to tell later on that evening. But as he examined the situation more closely, dread settled in. Josh made several desperate attempts to free his brother, but none of them worked. In fact, he had made the situation worse. Jon had slid further down into the passage and was now completely upside down, with both of his arms pinned to his side, unable to move at all. It was at this point that the 2 brothers realized that they needed help. Josh alerted the rest of the group and left a friend to stay with Jon as he rushed out of the cave system to a nearby hill to get reception and call 911. Knowing help was on the way, he went back down into the cave where his brother was still pinned upside down. It would be 3 hours before help would arrive. At 12:30 a.m., the first rescuer arrived on the scene. It was Susie Matola, a local volunteer who immediately rushed to the scene when she received a message on her pager. Right away, Susie realized that Jon's predicament was much, much worse than she had thought. She knew she had to keep Jon calm, and so she greeted him and told him that he'd be out in no time and not to worry, to which Jon replied, "Hi Susie, thank you for coming, but I really want to get out." Susie tried absolutely everything she could think of to pull Jon out, including cutting off part of his jeans to free up some space. But after 2 hours, Susie was exhausted and unsuccessful. She was forced to crawl back up to the surface where, at this point, both his wife and his daughter and around 30 rescuers had arrived on the scene. There, a very concerned but calm group were brainstorming plan after plan. They discussed everything from breaking Jon's legs to lubricating the walls with several gallons of oil. But eventually, they decided upon a system of ropes and pulleys to hoist Jon out, legs first. This pulley system would be aided by drilling some of the rock around him to create more space. Members of the rescue team made their way to Jon with the equipment, but they ran into problems. The rock wasn't coming away quickly enough, and removing what did come away from the wall was proving impossible to do safely, not least of which because the rock was falling back down onto Jon. Back at the surface, the rescue team, now in their hundreds, were all becoming increasingly concerned. Things were moving slowly. Each trip to pass a piece of gear to Jon's location, 700 feet deep within the cave, took an hour, and only one person could ascend or descend down the passageway at a time. To make matters worse, when rescuers told on-site trauma surgeon Doug Murdoch that Jon was upside down, Doug made the team aware that this likely meant that Jon would only have 10 hours before his organs would fail. The human body is designed to be upright. The heart works with the force of gravity. If it can't, blood and fluids quickly begin to pool in the brain and lungs, and eventually it becomes extremely difficult to breathe. On top of this, the heart begins to work overtime, and it becomes increasingly difficult to pump blood around the body, which can lead to cardiac arrest. This was something Susie noticed within the first hour of working to free Jon, a distinct rattling noise coming from his chest, a clear sign that fluid was pooling in Jon's lungs. He was already starting to asphyxiate. The rescue team decided that the immediate goal should be to get Jon out of his dangerous position to alleviate the pressure on his lungs. The team got to work immediately to install the first system of ropes and pulleys, but they quickly ran into several problems. Jon's legs and feet couldn't bend back around the curve of the shaft he had slipped into. On top of this, the lip of rock that he had breathed in to slip past was catching on his chest. It was, as one official put it, the worst possible place to be stuck. Nonetheless, the team managed to hoist him up enough to elevate his position slightly and administer IV. Unfortunately, just moments later, this first pulley system failed, and Jon slid back down into his original spot. At this point, Jon was swinging in between a state of calm and panic, and so a decision was made to bring a two-way cable radio into the cave so that Jon could speak with his wife. The conversation was tense, but it did serve to keep him calm enough for the next system of ropes and pulleys to be installed. Finally, after 19 hours, a team of 8 were ready to pull, but there was a problem. Each pull was agonizing for Jon, and the team had to pause several times to avoid breaking his legs. And then, a glimmer of hope. On the third pull, Jon was lifted up high enough to make eye contact with his rescuer, who later commented that his eyes were red, his face was dirty, but that he seemed fine otherwise. When the rescuer asked him how he was, Jon said, "It sucks. I'm upside down. I can't believe I'm upside down. My legs are killing me." The rescuers saw that even though Jon was complaining, he had a smile on his face. And then, on what was to be the fourth pull, disaster struck. The raising system that was helping to hold him in position, one of the devices in that system, failed, and Mr. Jones actually ended up falling back into the area where he had been stuck for so long. The system had failed. The entire team fell backward. When the team regained composure, they realized that the worst thing imaginable had happened. A bolt that was drilled into one of the cave's walls had come out, causing part of the cave to crumble. This had hit the lead rescuer in the face, causing him to momentarily black out. And worst of all, Jon had slid back down into the crevice and had now become completely unresponsive. With the rescuer closest to Jon now needing medical attention, a second lead rescuer took his place. Satisfied that Jon was, in fact, still breathing in a state of desperation, the new rescuer somehow managed to slip a rope around Jon's waist, but he himself became stuck and needed help from other members of the team, sustaining multiple injuries in the process. A third lead rescuer made a last-ditch attempt to free Jon by desperately drilling away the rock around him, but it was no use. The entire team was exhausted, Jon was barely breathing, and was still unresponsive. He had gone into cardiac arrest, and tragically, there was nothing anyone could do. It was at this point that Jon's wife, Emily, was informed of the situation. Jon was technically alive but unconscious. In her desperation, she believed that he could still survive the ordeal and continued to radio down. In one of her final communications with Jon, she said, "I know you've been pushing so hard for so long. Why don't you rest for a minute and take a break, and then you can push again?" At this point, while they couldn't officially confirm it, rescuers suspected the worst, and so a brave paramedic was sent down to take a pulse, confirming what everyone had suspected. At 11:56 p.m. on the 25th of November 2009, Jon Edward Jones was pronounced dead, 28 hours after he had initially become stuck. Emily was initially in complete disbelief. She refused to believe that her husband could die from such a simple mistake, and did not accept that a pulse taken from the leg could indicate that he was dead. Eventually, officials managed to calm her down, agreeing that they would do everything in their power to remove her husband's body from the cave. Not wanting to let a grieving widow down, the team discussed what was reported to be some rather distasteful plans to get Jon's body out, but this would prove to be impossible. Even if they were able to free Jon, his lifeless body would not be able to twist properly in order to be fully removed from the cave, at least not intact. It was decided, given everything that had transpired, that it was simply too dangerous for the rescue team to attempt to remove his body, so a decision was made to seal the entrance of the cave with concrete, with Jon's body inside forever. Jon's family had a plaque installed on the entrance of the cave in his memory. Later, the family would release a statement where they said that Jon Edward Jones, husband, father, and pediatric cardiologist in training, would be remembered for his good nature, delightful sense of humor, strong work ethic, a genuine love of people, a masterful ability to relate to children, a love of and unwavering faith in the gospel of Jesus Christ, and his commitment to his family as an amazing husband, father, son, and brother. To this day, Jon's remains are still inside the cave, serving as a harrowing reminder of the very real risks of cave exploration.